Welcome everybody. It's episode 542 of the Severe MMA podcast. My name is Sean Sheehan, aka the Pod God, joined today by the Florian Wirtz of Irish MMA media. Ian O'Neill, as we talk about a big week in the world of mixed martial arts. We're going to talk about UFC 322, which goes down next Saturday. We're going to look back at the UFC Apex card, which happened. Not a great card, not a bad card. Some interesting things happened on it. We're going to talk a little bit about PFL and the changes they have made if we get time. And also Mokaev fought Jared Burns over the weekend, and we will mention that as well towards the end of the podcast. But first of all, Ian, let's get into it. UFC 322. I saw a few people calling it the card of the year. And I don't necessarily think they aren't without an argument in the main event. Della Maddalena defending his UFC welterweight title for the first time against the former lightweight champion Islam Makhachev. In the co-main event, we have another super fight with Valentina Shevchenko defending her 125-pound belt against the 115-pound champion Zhang Weili, or the former 115-pound champion. And then we have contender fights: Sean Brady against Michael Morales, Leon Edwards, Carlos Praches, Ian Gary's son's favourite fighter, Carlos Praches, Benil Dariush against Benoit Saint-Denis, and other things though, like Aaron Blanchfield and Tracy Cortez. You could say that's a contender fight as well. So lots of interesting fights in this. And this, Ian, is the sort of card, isn't it, that we really look forward to? Like, the last few weeks have been kind of tough going, and we're all like, oh God, this isn't great. I remember even I did the preview over on Patreon this week for the Apex card, and I think my opening line was, this card coming Saturday, and it is shit. So it's definitely not shit this weekend. What's your level of excitement for it? Because like, it feels like these cards are often, but like less than before in terms of the numbers of them, because there's, you know, as we call it, Apex slop a lot of the times. But like, does this card coming around for you make it even better because it's been bad for the last few weeks, or what way do you look at it? It's exactly that.
It is exactly like the torture, if you want to say, for lack of a better term, of the last 2 weeks. With, you know, just you want to see a little bit of excitement, a little bit of jeopardy in these cards, and you know, every fight has a certain level of meaning. But you know, it would be fair to say over the last couple of weeks, you know, there hasn't been that much jeopardy in these kind of fights. Hasn't been that top ranked opponents that you want to be seeing. Like, this card on Saturday night is exactly what we want to see. You know what I mean? It's been a weird year for mixed martial arts. It's been a weird week for mixed martial arts with everything that's gone on and gambling controversies and everything like that. You know, you can kind of get sucked into the negativity, but you know, big cards and big fights like we see in the co-main event and the main event and the undercard of this as well. That's exactly why we look and like why we love mixed martial arts. Intriguing fights, high level opponents, you know, high level game planning, and lots of analysis and interesting things to break down. And I'm really looking forward to this. They always deliver in New York, and I you know, it's hard to say, and you don't want to say too much, but you know, I'd be surprised if this card did not deliver on Saturday night, because you know, it's really set up to do so.
100%. And it's interesting as well, you mentioned the gambling controversy, because like, obviously it's not going to be a main topic today. We talked about it last week. I talked about it on the Q&A. I talked about it over on the betting show as well. And I was on with John Anik and Kenny Fleury today, so I've talked about it 4 times now at this stage. But one or two further things I'd maybe mention just on it in connection, I suppose, with this weekend. I wonder, will anything change? Will we hear anything about it? Will we, you know, if there's a movement in betting, will there be a fight pulled? And like, even a movement in betting that is, you know, normal. I know I love to look at the embeddeds with a forensic eye and see someone limping, and you know, you never know what someone would see and why maybe someone might bet on something, or after a press conference and things like that, which is normal and happens weekly. But will there be you know, will there be, I suppose, a more
Any wincing on the scales? You know what I mean? We saw it last week as well. Bonfim didn't look great on the scales. We've seen it in previous fights as well. The one, the Rio card with the broken hand. And I mean, you know, that's not the level of quote unquote fight fixing that, maybe Isaac Dulgarian has been accused of. But, there's two sides to that stick as well. We notice it, but fighters are kind of pushed into a position where they're probably need to fight hurt.
Yes.
Because they're not fighting as much anymore, and that's their only paycheck as well. But I mean, I looking at Bonfim on the scales there during the week too. You could see obviously he missed weight by 5 pounds, looked very uncomfortable, and a smart guy would be putting money down against him. And it's something that everybody is watching with a closer eye now, given what's happened over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and what the other thing I wanted to mention as well is that, like, I feel like everyone now is trying to keep an eye out for a fixed fight. And I think we need to be very, very careful about that. And there's two reasons for that, but there's two sides to this as well. Like, the first thing I saw from Topology, Stephen Keller, and that's his name, isn't it? Like, talking about, some of the fights where, like, Reece Street and stuff on, basically calling them fixed fights, even though they're not fixed fights. It's just one superior fighter. And then I know Andy messaged him, and fair play to Andy. I think his reply was very good. Like, that's absolutely nonsense. Like, comparing those two things, like, completely and utterly different. Like, okay, you can say or agree with the fact that record padding is a bad thing in mixed martial arts, or short notice replacements just to keep a ticket seller on the card is a bad thing for mixed martial arts, no problem. But it's not the same as taking a dive in a fight. Absolutely not. And the other thing I would say as well, and then we'll move on to the card here in a second, but like a lot of people are trying to decide which fights are fixed and look at a fight and go, oh, this happened there and that happened there. Oh, that must be fixed.
It's been absolutely crazy.
It's been ridiculous. And I will just say this, right? And I was mentioning this as well with John Anik and Kenny Florian, but we look at last week's fight because of what happened before it, and the adjustment in betting patterns, and the FBI getting involved, and Dana White and the UFC coming out and talking about it. And we see things that happened in that fight. And you look at it and go, Jesus, was Dulgarian kind of faking defense there, and then he just gave it up in the end? And like, when you look at it through that lens, you can say, oh shit, that does look dodgy. And it did look dodgy, there's no doubt about that. But if you look at another fight, any random fight, and you see something like that, and you go, oh shit, that must be dodgy too, it might be the case, right? I'm not saying no other fights are fixed or anything like that, but it's not necessarily the case. And I won't give an example, because the only possible examples you can give in this, Ian, are people who either A, fix fights, or B, are absolutely terrible at mixed martial arts, right? So I don't want to be going on here as calling out a UFC fighter for being really terrible or fixing a fight without proof of the latter. Because, like, you're saying someone is so bad that they look like they're throwing a fight on purpose, right? But I'll put it to you this way, and then, as I said, we'll move on. There are people that bad in the UFC right now, right? And again, they'd all kill me and they'd all choke me out and everything like that. But there are people who have gotten choked in a worse way or a similar way to Isaac Dulgarian, and it wasn't a fixed fight. They just don't have the ability to defend like a black belt or like a very good UFC fighter.
What's the main factor in the difference between two of those kind of fights? It's the irregular betting patterns.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we're looking at here. You know what I mean? And that's where the suspicions raise, and that's where the accusations start. And I think that's fair as well. But I think people have been jumping on this and creating their own opinion based off their own opinion and not facts.
Yeah.
And I think that's a dangerous thing to do as well. And I think, we should just let it play out, see what comes of it, and then we can have the conversations then after the fact. But it's nothing that you want to see in mixed martial arts. It's disappointing, it's bad, it's negative press. But like I said, this card this weekend, 322. This is what we all love and adore about mixed martial arts. Good cards, great fights, and hopefully no controversies.
Yeah, did you see Dana White's putting out a Netflix documentary, and my suggestion,
Netflix putting it out on him, it's like real bad.
Yeah, sorry, yes, the Netflix put out in Dana White, and my suggestion to call it Dive to Survive. Like they have to do that. Let's do it. Anyway, let's get into the card. Jack Della Maddalena versus Islam Makhachev, and I'll be honest, Ian, like the second, there's some fights that are made, right? And I look at the fights and I see a big favour to jump on the betting bandwagon there for a second. And I'm thinking like, I don't really have to put much thought into this fight. One guy is, he's a good fighter, and the other guy is just far superior and going to win the fight. And that, to me, was this fight all over. Islam Makhachev, I think, is a way superior fighter and is going to beat JDM. But then I went back over the last week when I got time to watch a bit of tape on both of these guys. And I'll tell you what, I've not that I have changed my pick or anything like that, but I've definitely changed my thinking in that this is like a fight that only one person can win. I think, Jack Della Maddalena is a very, very, very good fighter. Islam Makhachev is a fantastic fighter as well. Either pound for pound number one or pound for pound number two, depending on how you're feeling of an evening. But there are so many factors, I suppose, that are going to go into this. And I think a lot of it is dependent on the adjustment in weight classes for Islam Makhachev. This is his first fight, definitely in the UFC anyway, up at 170. Not that Jack Della Maddalena is the biggest welterweight in the world. I believe he has fought at middleweight before, but I was watching some of his, obviously back some of his fights, and he never really massively outsized anyone or anything like that. He is Islam Makhachev's 5'10", Jack Della Maddalena 5'11", and in terms of height, obviously very similar, and in terms of size as well, I don't think massively dissimilar. We heard this week as well about Islam Makhachev's issues making weight, and maybe he is more of a natural welterweight than anything else. Is there something in, having watched a lot of fights down through the years, that you can pinpoint in this matchup with the change in weight class playing a big part in this? Or will it not matter at all? Will it come down? Because sometimes I see lads moving up weight classes. Here's an example, MVP. I think him moving the middleweight didn't really have any change in him. Maybe even better. He's faster up there. And some people can move weight classes and it hurts them. Others, as I said, very similar. For Makhachev moving up, do you think it is a good thing or a bad thing, or do you think it's just going to be skill versus skill here?
I think it's a good thing. I think, there's always been doubts and, how much the weight cut took out of Islam Makhachev. And it's crazy to think that, because he's performed so well at lightweight as well. I was very curious to see how he would kind of transform his body, and he's looking huge. I mean, we could be birthing a new mythical fighter here. We had TRT Vitor, we had C-Level Kane, we had Dad Cowboy Cerrone, and now we have Creatine Islam Makhachev as well. He's on the creatine big time. He's looking huge going into this fight. How does that carry over into the actual fight? We don't know. We really don't know yet. I think it will carry in good. I don't think it will have too many negative effects on him. I think we're going to see a more powerful, a more strong Islam Makhachev. We're probably going to see a guy who's probably willing to push that pace a little bit more if he doesn't, have to kill himself to make weight. I don't know what his walk around weight is right now. I'm sure maybe stories and snippets I'm embedded will kind of give us some information of that, but he's probably walking around close to 190, 195, I would imagine, cutting down to 170 here. Now, it's still a big cut, but I wouldn't think he would have to kill himself to get down there. So in the terms of the matchup itself, what's really intriguing me is the camp versus camp status here, because these are two camps that have competed against each other before, and that was when Alex Volkanovski took on Islam Makhachev. And I think the introduction of Craig Jones into the equation, I think had some success for Volkanovski in the first fight that they fought, and I'm interested to see if they can translate that into JDM here, and have some success against Islam Makhachev. Because at times in that first Volkanovski fight, Islam Makhachev did struggle against Volkanovski, did struggle in the scrambles, didn't win all of the scrambles. It went on to win the fight. It was a close fight. Alexander Volkanovski is obviously an elite level fighter. He'll be a Hall of Famer, I would imagine, in years to come. Is Jack Della Maddalena that kind of fighter? Well, that's the question that I also have as well. I'm not sure if he has reached or can reach that elite level status. But he did a very, very good job in nullifying Bilal Muhammad's game in here, the last fight that I was at in Montreal. I actually seen it live, but at the same time, Bilal Muhammad played into that game plan a lot by really not trying to enforce his grappling style on Jack Della Maddalena, and I don't think that that's going to be the case when Islam Makhachev steps in there. I think Islam Makhachev is going to try and win this fight in all areas, and he'll do what he does best against all of the fighters here, Shawty. He will threat with his grappling, which will open up his striking. And if he's, maybe JDM is getting a bit of momentum on the feet, that's where he will maybe level change and take the fight down. Islam Makhachev is a guy who likes to control every second of where a fight goes. And to go back to my original point, I don't think he was able to do that against Alex Volkanovski in the first fight. And that tells me that there was an implementation of a game plan that did work once before. It wasn't enough, but there are some signs there where you can have success against Islam Makhachev. And Dustin Poirier did as well. Dustin Poirier did have some success there too. So while Islam is I believe, one of the best, if not the best fighter in the world right now, there has been some chinks in the armor. And I'm interested to see if Jack Della Maddalena can expose them on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I think you make a lot of good points in there. And just to add to that, I think, if you're to prepare for a fight with Islam Makhachev, Bilal Muhammad's probably a good guy to fight against just before, to prepare. Like, we've seen Bilal wrestling an awful lot down through the years, and his hands aren't bad, not as good as Makhachev's, I would say, but he does try to set up his wrestling with that. And to your point as well, like, it wasn't the best Bilal in the world that night. He didn't perform amazingly, but how much of that was Jack Della Maddalena and his performance as well? Like, I would say a bit of both, definitely. But watching back the fight there yesterday or the day before, it really struck me that, like, and I think this is becoming a real changing of the approach to fighting guys who are not just wrestlers, but kind of, I suppose, domineering fighters in their certain range. And that is, if you are the guy who is the not even just the harder hitting guy, but sometimes the harder hitting guy, but the guy who is better as a volume fighter against someone like an Islam Makhachev, who is maybe a more skilled fighter, or again a more dominant fighter when the fight gets to the ground. If you go forward and you can land your strikes while getting away without being taken down, or put them on the back foot, where it's obviously a lot harder to get the takedowns, and do that for 5 rounds, it's very hard for your opponent to adjust to that. We saw it with Steve Garcia as well last week. Onama just couldn't lay a finger on him. We saw it with Christian Leroy Duncan, as I said. We'll talk about that later on, against Tulio, who's a very accurate striker and hits very, very hard. So I feel like that was the approach from Jack Della Maddalena against Bilal. It stopped a lot of, or most, or almost all of Bilal's wrestling, and Jack Della Maddalena is a better striker, so Bilal didn't really have much for him there. If he can implement that game plan against Islam Makhachev, how is Islam going to riposte? Is he going to land counters off of the back foot? Is he going to be able to defend well enough to not lose rounds, or to be knocked out, or be put in trouble by JDM? So that's a very intriguing question for me. The other, I suppose, side of that thing is, can Jack Della Maddalena take the center of the cage, own the range, and land those shots going forward that puts Islam Makhachev on the back foot and takes him out of his game? Because if he can't, I think it's very tough for Jack Della Maddalena to win this fight, unless Makhachev over exit on the striking. And because I know his jab is very good, and he's a very long striker and a good striker. Before, I suppose, as you mentioned there, he takes up his takedowns, or he sets up his takedowns even. But if Islam Makhachev can keep it at range, both of them fighting for the center or winning that, I think he can set up his takedowns. I think he will get his takedowns and will win the fight. But like Islam, has had no fear taking down most guys, apart from Volkanovski, as you mentioned there, for the most part anyway. But Jack Della Maddalena looked awesome last time out in terms of that takedown defense and the approach to the fight that stopped Belal Muhammad from being able to take him down. So I would be very, very, very interested to see a fight. Like for the reason I started this, because I think Islam Makhachev could be the dominating fighter in this fight. I would, a little bit like Aspinall and Gann. Like, I wanted that fight to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes. If the takedown can be stopped here, or if Jack Della Maddalena gets the forward motion for this first round, by God, when that second round, third round, fourth round starts, it's just such a great fight then, isn't it?
I'm glad you mentioned Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gann. I was, another example I'd use is Alex Pereira as well. It's like, kind of smothering your opponent and getting and fighting in the pocket and forcing him to move on the back foot, where, you're defending obviously from boxing range. And we know Jack Della Maddalena is very good at boxing range, and he showed that against Belal Muhammad as well. And it's just given Islam Makhachev more things to think about. I think Islam is better when he's dictating the fight, like I said, on the outside, where he can make those first moves. But if you're Jack Della Maddalena, you need to be first in this fight. You need to kind of come out, you need to run out and meet him in the middle of the octagon and get that footwork working, get that cage closed off. He needs to be in the center of the cage for this fight. He cannot find himself in the outside threshold with his back close to the cage, because that's going to mean trouble. Islam is going to look to try and close the distance and try and utilize his grappling there. I think, I can see certain stages of this fight being, where Islam Makhachev is dominant early, and then if Jack Della Maddalena can survive, it will make it interesting in the later rounds. I can also see Islam Makhachev, if I'm being honest, going out there and wiping the floor with him as well. I can see JDM going on to win a dominant fight or knocking out or submitting Islam Makhachev there too. I think if Della Maddalena is going to win here, he's got to play the long game. He's got to almost survive in certain stages of this fight, and he's got to bring Islam Makhachev into deep waters. We did see Islam getting a little bit tired against Volkanovski. We know that he slows down, but he doesn't gas out when it gets to the later stages of the fight, and where his grappling isn't maybe as powerful or efficient as it would be in the early stages of a fight. But, all of those little intricacies, I'm super interested to see, having JDM in that camp and having game plan for Islam Makhachev and spent a lot of time studying his game. I'm wondering, have they figured it out? Have they found a way where they can make this fight a competitive fight? Because a competitive fight will be a close fight, and a close fight could be a junior. I knew I was going to make that snake. Junior DeSantis could be a Jack Della Maddalena win. And, I'm excited to see what Islam is, the start of a new chapter for Islam as well. Obviously moving up a way. Are we going to see a beast exposed here on Saturday night? And I'm excited to see all of those kind of things. I think it's an interesting main event. I'm actually glad. I know that you had been fairly down on Jack Della Maddalena, so I'm glad that you kind of, you've come around some sorts. I was going to ask you why you were so down on him, because I thought it was a little bit harsh, if I was being honest, and I think he did. I agree exactly what you said. I think Belal Muhammad wasn't at his best, but I think Jack Della Maddalena fought a fight to make him look at his worst as well in that fight in Montreal. And it'll be interesting to see if he can get it done against Islam.
Yeah, sometimes I go a little bit overboard and tongue-in-cheek, but I do still believe that Jack Della Maddalena isn't in the top 5 welterweights in the world. Like, I think,
which is totally fair. I would agree.
But like, the question is Islam Makhachev in the top 5 welterweights in the world? Like, now, if he wins this, obviously it's a great sign that he is. But again, we started off with moving up the weight class. Is that gonna hinder him? Like, and another thing I'd say just before we move on to your point as well, like about close fights. I was talking to someone there a couple of weeks ago, and like, if you look at all the close fights of like Team Habib, they usually win those fights. Look at the two Paul Hughes, Usman or Magomedov fights. We mentioned it now 5 or 6 times here, probably Volkanovski against Islam, even back in the day with Habib against Gleison, Tebow and others as well. Like, these guys win these fights, and what's the reason for that? I think the reason for that is kind of they're so well-rounded, and like you could look at a guy like Habib, and Habib's not the most well-rounded fighter in the world, wasn't the best striker, but still he could hit you hard, and he could throw a big knee and land it, and when he got the fight to the ground, he was absolutely amazing. The elite of the elite, arguably the greatest ground fighter we've ever seen in the history of mixed martial arts. But he'd never get too far behind on the feet as well, because he'd do something mad or make sure he'd land something. And the same even with Usman or Magomedov against Paul Hughes, even though I think most people would think he was losing a lot of that fight, or portions of a lot of that fight against Paul Hughes, he always kept the jab in there. He always kept active. So even if it was a Paul Hughes round, it was going to be close for him. Islam Makhachev does a similar sort of thing. Look at that. I think it was the 4th round against Volkanovski, if I'm not mistaken, when he got Volkanovski to the ground and he landed those few shots to just keep that lead maybe. And even though he didn't really do much, they're smart. These lads know how to win rounds, and
very good fight IQ in that camp. I think Habib didn't get enough credit for his fight IQ and fighting to his, I think he got credit for fighting to his strengths, but fighting to your strengths is high level fight IQ, and you're spot on as well. I think Islam has that too. It's just those little momentum shifts that are needed in fights sometimes to kind of maybe sway the opinion of a judge as well. So it's definitely going to be an interesting one.
One last question just on that before we go in. Who do you think for the future of that division, who'd be the better guy to win? Would it be better if Islam won, or would it be better if Jack Della Maddalena won?
If you want activity in the division, it's going to be better if JDM wins this fight. If you want to witness history and be a part of greatness, it's probably better for you to want Islam Makhachev to win this fight, because the worry I have with an Islam win is that he's inactive, very, very inactive. And, obviously Ian Gary is knocking on the door there. If, he goes out and picks up a win against Bilal Muhammad. That's next week, the week after. It's on November 22nd. Yeah. So it will line up probably for a big fight next year, but that's not probably going to happen until June or July next year, because obviously Ramadan will be early next year. Islam is known not to fight really too much at the start of the year. And, we all like activity in divisions, and that's what we want to see in divisions. And I think that's the only kind of criticism that you can give to Islam Makhachev, is that, he may not be as active of a champion as we would all like him to be. And I don't think that he is going to be wanting to stay around in this division all too much either. I think he probably has 3 to 4 fights in this division. Maybe flirt with the idea of going down there and fighting Ilia Topuria in one of those 3 or 4 fights as well. And I think we're going to see something similar with Islam than what we've seen with Habib, is that just when we're really wanting more is going to be the time when he decides he's willing to hang it up. And, fair play to him if that is the case. And I think what he would have achieved if he does go on and win this fight and beat a couple of opponents in welterweight is do something that Habib didn't do, and that was move up in weight and win a title. And I think it would be a more justified of a retirement if he did hang up his gloves after a couple of more fights in the welterweight division than Habib's decision to do so when he did in the lightweight division.
Yeah, I remember we spoke about that after it happened, and I maintained that the demotivation for him to go up was to kind of get, not necessarily get out of Habib's shadow, but the only way he could prove himself a better fighter than Habib, or a more highly touted fighter than Habib, let's put it that way, was by going up. But I agree with you as well that it'd be better for the division for Jack Della Maddalena to win. It might be better for the UFC as well, because Islam Makhachev's not retiring anytime soon, I think, if he loses, and I think he'd go back down. And I think he'd either directly fight Ilia Topuria, or have one fight and then fight Ilia Topuria, which is great for that division too, and it's better for the welterweight division nearly as well, because like, okay, Makhachev goes up and wins. I'd love to see the Gary fight. I'd love to see the Moraes fight, or Morales fight, or Sean Brady fight, or whoever it might be as well. No problem. But we could have all of those fights, you know, those lads against JDM or those lads against each other if one of them beats JDM. I feel like at lightweight, you know, we're talking about Paddy Pimblett next maybe for Ilia Topuria. Not exactly the fight that Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev would be. So, look, we'll see on Saturday night. Speaking of champion versus champion fights, we also have Valentina Shevchenko against Zhang Weili. And one thing I wanted to just point out, Ian, is just the activity of the two of these over the last while. So, for Zhang Weili, she fought in February against Tatiana Suarez. It was the April before when she fought Yan Xiaonan. She fought once as well in 2023 in August against Amanda Lemos. It was nearly a year before that, in November of 22, when she fought Carla Esparza. And before that, she was obviously more active. But since then, since June 22, she's had 4 fights. That's not a whole lot. And for Valentina Shevchenko, she's had a very weird last few years as well. Like, she fought in September 23 and in September 24 and in May 25. So that's, you know, again, 3 fights in 3 years. Fought Alexa Grasso twice and then, you know, eased to a victory, I suppose, over 5 rounds against Manon Fiorot. I wonder, at 37 years of age, Valentina Shevchenko against 36 years of age, Zhang Weili, are we getting both of these at their very best? Like, I certainly don't think we're getting Shevchenko at her very best. I think Zhang Weili still looks amazing every time we see her, but she's 3 decisions now in a row. You know, Suarez, the Suarez and Fiorot fights were very similar, I think, in that we both expected them to be high-level challengers for them, and neither were. Both, like, massively disappointed, I would say. So we're almost forced into this fight. And so here's the 2 sides of the question, Ian, and I'm kind of praying it's the positive side. All I put to you there a little bit negative, maybe they're not there, but also, is this the fight that both of them needed to get through that camp and be like, I have to be on it, I have to be my best ever, I'm going to be faster, hit harder, train harder, all of this, and they're going to both look amazing coming into this? Which side of it are you at? Are they old and decrepit and useless, or are they going to be the best we've ever seen them? No, I don't.
I'm kind of on both sides of the question, if I'm being honest. And it's funny that you said that to me, because I wanted to start off with that opinion as well when I was giving my analysis on this fight, whereas I start off on the negative side, and I wish we would have maybe seen this fight 3 or 4 years ago. You know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Okay, we're seeing it now, and I think, okay, on the competitive side, it still is a fantastic fight. It's one of the best fights that you can put on in women's mixed martial arts right now, full stop, if not the best. I think the fact that both of these women have had a similar enough trajectory, you know, at 37 and 36 right now, both of them, I feel Valentina has fallen off a little bit, but is still brilliant. I think Zhang Weili has fallen off a little bit too, but still looks brilliant. Both of them have had to pass tough tests in the last couple of years, but in my opinion, it's been Valentina Shevchenko that's had to get over the bigger hurdles, more so than Zhang Weili. And this is a clash of styles that have always been intriguing, because if you really look and analyze and break down these fighters, they do have a lot of similarities. I think, you know, one kind of area in terms of fight style is that Zhang Weili does try to rely on her grappling a little bit more so than maybe Valentina Shevchenko, but we've seen spells in fights and we've seen periods of time in Valentina Shevchenko's career where she does rely on her grappling as well. I think, you know, the jury would have been out big time for me on Valentina Shevchenko winning this fight if it wasn't for her win against Manon Fiorot the last time out. And, you know, it's funny that I'm covering these 2 fights. I was in Montreal and I saw that fight live as well. And I was actually I was actually blown away, to be honest, by Valentina Shevchenko and how she handled that fight, and at the ease of what she won it too. It proved to me that, you know, even though she is getting older, she's definitely not done. She hasn't lost the heart and the desire. And I would definitely say the same about Zhang Weili as well. And I think your point about what you said is that, you know, sometimes you need moments and sometimes you need an opponent to bring the very best out of you. I think Manon Fiorot did that with Valentina Shevchenko. I think we've seen that with Zhang Weili time and time again. And now I think both are facing one of the toughest tests of their career. You know, obviously Valentina's been in there with all the greats as well, Amanda Nunes and everything. But in recent times, I think, you know, Zhang Weili is going to bring the very best out of Valentina Shevchenko. And I think, you know, Valentina Shevchenko is going to bring the very best out of Zhang Weili. And as I look and as I break this fight down in my head, I think that the advantages are more swinging towards Valentina Shevchenko getting the job done here. And that's going to be her ability to dictate where this fight plays out, because I think she's going to want this fight to play out on the feet. And I feel that she can do that. She has the skill set to do that. I think she showed that against Manon Fiorot, that she has that strength in the clinch and to be able to dictate where she wants the fight to be. And I think she still has that level of explosiveness and distance control to be able to keep Zhang Weili at bay here. So I guess I went into a small bit of analysis there. I think, you know, while the two of these are in the twilight of their career, I still think that they're good enough for this to be a really good fight. I don't think either one of these women are in their prime anymore, but that doesn't matter to me. I think both of them have had similar enough experiences and on a similar enough trajectory over the last couple of years for this to still be a fantastic fight that everybody can enjoy.
Yeah, it's weird from like I suppose, statistical point of view. They have almost the exact same amount of fights, almost the exact same amount of wins and losses. Very similar in terms of percentages of stoppages and decisions. It's very down the middle. Like, you know, and we started the last discussion about size, but one person moving weight classes. There's 1 inch in height difference between the two of these as well. And, you know, Shevchenko obviously has fought up at 135, but wasn't the biggest bantamweight in the world either. I suppose at that point, we ask ourselves the question, and I'll ask it to myself here: what is the key? And like, I agree with your point in that a huge assessment of what the key for this is control. Like, if let's say Zhang Weili's want in this fight is to wrestle and control the fight and take it there, it's very important if she can or can't do that. And the same for Shevchenko. Look, Shevchenko has been known to have a few takedowns, as you alluded to before, but not as much as other people, or as much as Zhang Weili at times either. But if that is her approach to maybe getting top, maybe use her size, you know, quote unquote size, maybe that's important. But for me, putting all those sort of parts of it together, like in terms of like who has the better striking, who has the better wrestling and everything like that, I think, look, we can say maybe Zhang Weili is a better wrestler and grappler, although Shevchenko is very good as well. We could say maybe Shevchenko is a better striker, different striker, but Zhang Weili is very, very good as well. The key I have found, and the difference maker for me, is going to be one word, and that's going to be speed. I wonder if Zhang Weili can come in here and be the faster fighter. I wonder, can she come in here and show Shevchenko what a fighter who, and I know we both talked about it, Ian, here, about primes, and both of them not being in their primes. I think, even though they're very similar in age as well, I think Zhang Weili is a lot closer to her prime than Shevchenko is to her. I wonder, can she show her...
And a lot less battle-worn, I would say, too.
100%. Can she show her what a fighter in her prime looks like, who has a massive speed advantage against someone who isn't as fast as they used to be? Like, we have seen it with Amanda Nunes in the first fight against Juliana Pena, how when you have slowed down a little bit and there's someone who is not... Look, this was a horrendous display by Amanda Nunes, we all know that, but Pena went in there through her hands and she was faster than her and overwhelmed her, and it destroyed her. Now, Amanda Nunes is different from Valentina Shevchenko in that if that happens to Valentina Shevchenko, I can't see her just wilting and getting finished in a similar manner. No disrespect to Amanda Nunes or anything like that, but look at the fact of the matter, that's what happened in that fight. But I could see her finding herself in a place where she just has put out plan A, put out plan B, put out plan C. None of them work. And, one of those plans might be to keep it on the feet, control it. Doesn't work. One of those plans might be to get inside, controller, and that doesn't work. And plan B might be to get inside, controller, trip her, get her to the ground and control her there. And then that mightn't work. And then you find yourself in a place where there's someone who is lightning quick, who is just as good a technical fighter as you, now has the upper hand over you, and you've wasted everything or exhausted is the word I'm looking for, all game plans, I suppose, and none of them work. Now, again, I'm adding a lot on there and proposing a lot of different things happen, but if we're trying to predict what's going to happen or analyze what might happen, like I'm leaning the other way from you. I think I'm probably leaning from Zhang Weili, because I think that speed might be the key. Now, it mightn't be. It might come down to like the more technical fight. Like when you see this fight, how do you see it?
You can have the speed, I think, right? Mm-hmm. But are you going to be able to find the target? And does Valentina have enough about her defensively, to be able to maneuver around that speed? I think that's the big question that I would have. And when it comes to the grappling, I think Zhang Weili is not going to be able to outstrength Valentina Shevchenko. I think Shevchenko showed in the last fight against Manon Fiorot that she's not going to be bullied. And I don't think if Manon Fiorot was unable to bully Valentina Shevchenko, I think Zhang Weili is not going to be able to bully her too. But she doesn't need to bully her to get her down. She doesn't need to outstrength her in the grappling exchanges. Like you said, she needs to out-technique her. And can she out-technique her? I think she could probably out-technique her a little bit more in the wrestling exchanges than I believe she can in the striking exchanges. I think she is a good, fast, explosive striker, but I just think that Valentina Shevchenko she's so tricky on the feet to be able to deal with, where she's so defensively sound. She knows the shots to pick. She knows how to keep active, to keep her opponents away from her. She's with the leg kick, the body kick, the teeps, she good left hooks. She just has such an array of striking, and her combinations are always varied as well. She's a very hard person to read, because she just has a big what's the word I'm looking for? She's a big array of kind of striking
arsenal
combinations. An arsenal, that's the word I was looking for. She has a huge arsenal of strikes in her there, and she always keeps her opponents guessing. And I think speed and explosiveness can get around that in some ways, but I think this fight is probably going to go all five, and I don't know whether Zhang Weili will be able to do it and maintain it over the course of 4 or 5 rounds in this fight. I think this is going to be a very close fight. I'm not completely ruling out Zhang Weili at all, but I really think that Zhang Weili is going to find herself wanting to take this fight down at times, and I'm not sure if she's going to be able, or Valentina Shevchenko is going to let her. And then does the doubt creep into Zhang Weili's mind then? Do you start, like you said, running out of answers here? And that's what I'm most interested in this fight. I mean, if she has some success early, I wouldn't be surprised, Zhang Weili. But will she, if the fight goes on into rounds 3, rounds 4, and rounds 5, will she have that explosiveness? Will she have that? She'll have some level of strength, but will that strength maintain in the later rounds? And I'm not sure it will against Valentina Shevchenko. Will she be able to get in at Valentina Shevchenko with that explosive striking? I think Valentina Shevchenko controls distance so well, and is an excellent game planner too. She knows how to win fights as well. Similar enough to what we were saying with Islam Makhachev and his team as well. It's a very interesting one. And I'm super excited for this one. I think on a competitive side, I'm more interested in this fight than I am the main event, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, can't wait for it. We will have a preview, obviously, for all of UFC 322 during the week. So maybe we'll leave it there for now, and we'll come back during the week and we'll talk about the Brady Morales fight, Leon Edwards-Pratt and all the rest as well. But I think we've a good breakdown of those fights there. But as I said, yeah, tune in when I'll put it up. Even if you're listening to this, I'll put it up on the SevereMMA podcast feed as well, so you can get the preview show for that as well there. Let's talk about Mohamed Mokaev against Jared Burns here for a second. And considering we're an Irish MMA podcast, I know you broke it down last week in terms of the preview on the Old Triangle, and you'll be talking about it again in a couple of weeks' time. But just briefly here, I suppose from both sides, from a Mokaev side and from, I suppose, the Irish side and the Jared Burns side, I'm like, you couldn't praise a guy more than Jared Burns and FAI for taking a fight like this and being as game as you can. But Brave and Foolhardy are very, very close. And like, okay, what is he, 7-2 now in his career? He'll bounce back and he'll go on to be a very good fighter. Like, you've talked about him for years over in the Old Triangle. I've watched him fight a couple times. I know he's a good fighter. Things like this can be very, very damaging, or they can be like, well, that's the level I have to get to, and you're wise to it. And let's hope it's like that for him. But I wouldn't be a big fan of this matchmaking. I find it very hard to criticize a fighter or a team for taking a fight, because at the end of the day, we want fighters to go out and fucking do it and give it all. So I've no real criticism for them, but the matchmakers making this fight, like, it was like boys against men in there, and it should be like that. You'll have an up and coming guy who's just turned pro basically against the greatest amateur fighter we've ever seen, and maybe the best flyweight in the world right now. Like, if you put him in there against Pantoja, he might very well be favoured to win that fight, the UFC flyweight champion. Look, Mokaev went in there and he looked amazing. He looked absolutely fantastic. Apart from the low blow in the first round, and Burns landed one right hand as well with maybe 20 seconds or so left in the first round. He dominated, and then he came out very early and kind of got that, I would call it maybe an adjusted question mark kick followed by a left hook to finish it off. But I'm big fan of what Mokaev did, big fan of performance, big fan of the finish, big fan of Jared Burns' heart and all of that. But it's the sort of fighting that I've no interest in seeing, really, and the sort of matchmaking that I absolutely hate. And I'm not a big one for giving out about matchmaking kind of at outside the UFC level, because I realise it's very, very hard. And look, to Brave's credit, Mokaev called him out. Burns wanted to fight, and they made the fight, but I don't know. I can't. Let's put it this way. I wouldn't see Ian Dean making that sort of fight. What did you think of all of that? Am I going a bit overboard? Am I
not necessarily. I think, look, to be fair, we have kind of seen some fights like that in Cage Warriors too. Maybe more so a last minute replacement, more so than what we've seen here. As look, Jared Burns was calling for a fight like this, and you have to admire him for wanting to get in there and challenge himself. Look at Jared Burns is a guy who, was watching mixed martial arts and up at Cage Conflict as a fan and saw the fights and wanting to kind of, took that as inspiration to start training, had a good amateur career and has worked his way up to a title shot here against Mokaev in Brave. And you have to admire him for doing that. But I don't think you're going overboard at all in that. In terms of, hindsight is a great thing, but this, always to me looked like a little bit of a mismatch based off where Jared Burns is in his career so far. He's 7-3 now, 7-2 going in there to what you said is a guy who's can go in and compete against top 3 level opponents in the UFC right now and compete and win, and he has done so. He should be still there if we're being honest.
Yes.
We talk about fighters getting the UFC test. But, that's normally a veteran that's coming towards the end of his career, not a guy who's probably should be up there challenging for a title in the UFC flyweight division. So it was always going to be a big mountain for Jared Burns to climb. And, I agree with you too, also saying that, why wouldn't you take this fight if you're FAI or you're Jared Burns? But at the end of the day, what my big fear coming into this fight was something that you kind of touched on was a defeat going to happen here for Jared Burns that would absolutely change his career? That was my worry. Was he going to get really badly hurt in this fight? I didn't want him to get really badly hurt. Now, he got knocked out, but I can't say that he got really badly hurt. So that's a good thing. He has created a platform for himself to learn, to grow, and to get back to a point like that again. And I think that's the positive that I'll take out of that fight. He got off a couple of shots in the first round, didn't completely go his way, and then obviously he was a little bit upset at the stoppage after the fact, but I think he probably slowly realized that it was a good stoppage. It was a fair stoppage. It was a flash knockdown, and it was a fantastic performance from Mokaev. And I mean, you know, what the fuck are we doing here with Mokaev? Like, let's get him back to the fucking UFC.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just don't understand it. Like this, like you have all of this kind of crazy stuff that's going on in the UFC and fighters going out there and saying outrageous stuff. And because Mokaev might have been a little bit ignorant to a UFC staff member, he's kicked to the curb. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It goes against everything that, you know, the UFC built its name upon, and that's, you know, having the best fighters fighting in the best organization. And they've let another couple of fighters slip through the cracks in recent years as well over to PFL too. And there is a double level of standards that the UFC set, and they've created this environment within the company that if you don't toe the company line, that, you know, you're not going to get the favors, or you're going to get kicked to the curb, or you're not going to get your 50 grand bonus if you go out there and beg for it. And I think this is a Muhammad Mokaev situation has been one that has highlighted kind of a big problem that the UFC has right now, and that's a kind of wanting to operate as a dictatorship more so than a fight promotion for the best fighters in the world. And I think, you know, Mokaev deserves to be back in there fighting the very best fighters in the world.
Yeah, it's insane that he's not in the UFC, and especially at a time when you're basically running out of challengers for Pantoja. So hopefully, you know, hopefully we see that at the beginning of next year, and we see him back in there. But yeah, I look, a great performance, and again, fair play to Jared Burns, but I would have loved it if the fight hadn't happened. I just want to mention briefly about the PFL, because I've actually planned another show for Over in Sherdog, and I'm sure we have a chasing back coming up soon as well, where we'll be talking more about it. But just to mention briefly, I suppose, that PFL have taken away their tournaments. The new CEO was on the MMA Hour with Ariel. What's it called now? It's not the MMA Hour anymore. Ariel Hawani show? Is that what it's called? Or is it the MMA? No, it is the MMA Hour, is it? I don't know. Anyway,
the MMA Hour, isn't it?
Is it? Maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was on with Ariel, and he basically said that the global tournament is dead, and they're going to be just doing normal fights. I think he said the same in Europe, no more tournaments, but in other places, like possibly Africa and MENA, that the tournaments will stay, but in a different format. I would say two things around this, right? From my own point of view, and I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I really enjoyed the tournaments, and I think people who watched the PFL and who liked the PFL won't be happy with this. I like, especially like, I can understand somewhat they got rid of the global tournament because they, you know, everyone has been given out about it, right? But to get rid of the European tournament, like, I really don't understand that. Like the European, the MENA, and all of that. I think you can keep those tournaments and still do like a massive card in Dublin or a massive card in Paris or London, like one of your big cards. They've done that. Look, they did it in Africa. They put on a fantastic, the first fight, Johnny Eblin and Casella Van Steenis, I think it was, and Dakota Ditcheva fought in that one as well, if memory serves me correctly. So you can still do that. And the other side of it then, I think, is a lot of people who don't watch PFL would say, I don't like the tournaments. If you didn't have the tournaments, I'd watch, but they wouldn't. Like it's, I really don't think they would. And like, at least with the tournaments, you get, like, let's say to a semi-final spot, you have a really good fight, and people think, okay, I'll tune in and I'll watch that because it's a really good fight. The winner that'll be fighting for, you know, the million as it was, but the $500,000. And in the finale card, when it wasn't in pay-per-view that time, which was absolutely insane, I think people generally tuned in for them too. Plus, you still had the fights outside of that. Let's say Dakota Ditcheva, you know, the fight we just talked about, the Ditcheva-Eblin ones, people would tune in for them, or the Paul Hughes fight and things. You could still have them with the tournaments. And like at the moment, Usman Nurmagomedov is the champion. Why not do an 8-man tournament, and the winner of that fights Usman Nurmagomedov? You don't, like, and do you know what I love? I love the fact that they're taking away the ambiguity now, right? That's the best part of all this, and we've called for that for a long time on the Chasing Pack. But I think you could have done that with a quick adjustment that goes, we have one champion in the lightweight division, and let's just take the lightweight division for an example. His name is Usman Nurmagomedov. We're going to have a tournament, right? The winner of that tournament is going to get $500,000. They're going to get a tournament belt. You know, you're the 2025 tournament champion, and that's it. It ends there. You don't defend that. And what you also get for that is a number one contendership. So the next time the champion fights, you fight them. You know, the champion can fight again in the middle of the tournament let's say Alfie Davis won it this year. He's going to fight Usman Nurmagomedov next. And then, you know, my guy Archie Colligan will fight him after that without having been in the tournament while the tournament's going on, and then maybe Paul Hughes wins the tournament and he'll fight him next. It's just like, I think that is a really good progression for the PFL, something where you're looking at the promotion and going, here's the guy, here's the champion, they're all fighting for a go at this guy, and you have the normal brilliant cards like every promotion should have, with a tournament added into them. I think without that tournament, all you have is the normal cards, and one of them is good, and people might tune into it, and then the next one has no jeopardy whatsoever because there's no tournament fights on it. So like there's lots of fights I've tuned in to watch, and I'm like, if that fight was just like a normal prelim or a UFC prelim or like whatever prelim, I probably wouldn't be watching it, or like we wouldn't have to break it down and discuss it as much as like, oh, if this guy wins, he'll be fighting Alfie Davis or he'll be fighting Clay Collard or whoever it might be, and you know, it gives it something else to it. And I understand for a lot of people they wouldn't watch that, but they certainly won't watch if that isn't there. I don't think that it makes any sense to me. But again, I understand that I'm in the minority there, but I think I think I will also be in the minority of people who watch PFL after this changes. I don't think it'll gain them many fans, garner many fans. No, they might make other things that do. They might sign other people. They might make massive fights over and over and get their champions fighting more regularly, which would definitely help. But this in itself, I am not the biggest fan of. What's your take, Ian?
I was always a fan of the tournaments, and I think what you said is what about how much it's going to affect the European market. If you don't have tournaments on there, I think unless you're stacking those cards, and a decision like that would make me wonder: are they going to try to scale back from the European cards a little bit? You know, are they going to try and focus on those big cards in the US, or maybe have a couple of big cards over in Dubai as well? I think there is a world where we can have tournaments and we can have the championship series cards as well. You know, you could have the champion fighting on a card, and you could have like a number one contender tournament on the undercard as well. I think that's what the PFL need to do. The PFL don't need to be having any filler fights on any of their cards. They need to absolutely stack every single card, and if they're not going to do the tournaments, have contenders take each other on, create a level of structure in each one of the divisions, maybe introduce a ranking system. But the tournaments is what built the PFL's name to where it has been right now, and I think it's a strange decision right now to change that. I think it has been working for them, but I think let's kind of keep a close eye on it in 2026 and see what other kind of structures that they're wanting to build within the promotion, because they can't continue to do what they're doing right now without doing the tournaments. So if you're not doing the tournaments, what are you going to do to spark the interest of the mixed martial arts community and to draw in the casuals as well? I think, Shawnee, it is to, they won't want to kind of maybe admit it, but it's going off the old school UFC structure and build your name in the United States first. That's where, your core audience is there. Yeah, you stack every card, you have a title fight on every card, and you have like a good lot of contenders. You'll have to bring in ranking system, like I said, to kind of add a little bit of jeopardy to some of these fights. And you'll have to adhere to the ranking systems as well. That's, a big criticism that the UFC has, is that, a guy will work his way up the table and then up the rankings, and they'll match him up, or the guys who should be getting matched for the title are not getting that opportunity. I think if they can find that kind of level of structure within the PFL, I think that will intrigue the fans a lot. But it's kind of like, I don't want to. I kind of always fearful of shitting on the PFL all the time, but it's kind of like, you told us when you bought Bellator that this is what the future of mixed martial arts is going to be. The going out into different countries, having tournaments and fight and creating champions in different ways, and then bringing them back to the global tournament. And now you're telling us that the global tournaments are not going to be a thing anymore. So is it learning from past mistakes? Possibly, but it's kind of like the conversations that should have been happening at the start of the transition from when PFL have bought Bellator. And it's kind of something that we've been saying on the chase and pack for quite some time, is that sometimes certain decisions that are being made at board level and the PFL, it kind of seems like they're making it up as they go along. And it's a shame because the actual product inside the cage is very good.
Yeah, did a fantastic year.
Hopefully this guy will come in and bring the changes. You know, I want PFL to do well. We need that in the mixed martial arts market, and it'll be interesting to see how many more changes are implemented and how much of a positive or negative effect that it will have on the promotion as well.
Yeah, 100%. Let's finish up by talking about last night's card. First things first, Dean, I'm going to throw it over to you. What do you think of the stoppage in the main event, Gabriel Bonfim versus Randy Brown? Because I have a fairly strong opinion on this. What do you think?
I thought it was a good stoppage, and I tweeted that it was a good stoppage. And then I was a little bit surprised when I saw the backlash against the stoppage as well. And I'm like, oof. Is this a matter of circumstances that have happened in the last couple of weeks that people are just wanting to rag on officials? Because, you know, we've come on here, we've criticized Mark Smith over some of the outrageous stuff that he's done inside of the cage, but I don't think he did a bad job at all. I think he absolutely did a fantastic job. I don't know what people are looking for here. Randy Brown ate a monstrous knee over through the middle, went crashing down to the canvas, head hit off the back of the canvas, arm was all curled up. He was completely out, reacted to the referee touching him and stopping the fight. And what you need to do, if you're looking at this, is number one, think, would he have done that? Like, if Bonfim had to come in or had been allowed to come in there, Bonfim wouldn't have been touching him in the back of the head. He would have been giving him a couple of coffin nails.
Yes.
And he would have absolutely been a hell of a lot more concussed and hurt than he was when the fight was stopped. Another thing that seemed like people seemed to be ignoring last night was the fact that when Randy Brown got to his feet, he was wobbling all over the place. He was completely unsteady here. So I think that should be enough to tell you that stoppage was a good. I wouldn't even say it was a good stoppage. I would say that was a great stoppage by Mark Smith.
Yeah, I agree.
He got in there, and we have to give credit where credit is due. And I don't know, like it has some of the decisions that have been made inside the cage by officials, and you know, they have been questionable in recent times. And I think people are looking for an opportunity maybe to pile on the officials even more. But I think that was a bad example last night.
Terrible.
I think. Yeah, it was a good stoppage. I don't know. I was actually really surprised to see the backlash of a lot of the general opinion siding on that being a bad stoppage. I don't know.
I think part of it is exactly what you said there. Like, they just want more a backlash. I think part of it as well is just like people just don't know what they're fucking looking at sometimes as well. Like, and you know, I don't know. It's one of those ones where you look at it, you see it, and you know, like for me and for you and for a lot of people, probably most people listening to this, they go, oh yeah, that's obviously a good stoppage, right? Without even having to think about it, without even having to analyze it, right? Now, sometimes that happens and you have to think a bit through it and go, actually, you know, my initial thoughts weren't correct and I have to readjust what I thought. And, you know, because that, like last week, Della, Waldo Cortez Acosta, like, fuck, he got eye poked, but you know, he went on and he knocked him out. Like, fuck, fair play. That's justice served. But then you have to think a bit more about it and go, actually, the process was completely incorrect. That wasn't
wrong,
right.
And it was wrong of the Nevada State Athletic Commission to come out and say that the situation was handled perfectly.
Handled perfectly.
Like, what the fuck are we doing here?
What a laugh.
Like,
anyway.
It's like, it's insane to see stuff like that. It's like so frustrating. It's like
crazy.
Like that. There is your opportunity there to kind of have a level of responsibility and ownership over of a situation, and what you do is you just double down in the wrong direction.
It was so easy and so obvious as well, just that. But anyway, I don't know. We might touch on that again in a second here, but just on this finish, like I always say,
I think what we forgot about was what fucking finish.
Before we get to that, talking to referees and stuff before, I've said this in the podcast multiple times. They always tell me to look at what happened before as well as look at what happens after, right? So what happened before? What happened in the rest of this fight? Gabriel Bonfim was beating Randy Brown up. He was destroying him in the first round, kicking the leg off him, had him hurt. Like, this fight was just I feel like it was on the knife edge of being stopped at all times, almost through it. And then he lands a massive knee. Randy Brown is out on his way down, hits the ground, as you said, hits his head off the canvas and wakes back up. And the stupidest thing I ever hear is some people saying, like, he got into a defensive position. He got into a defensive position because he walked back up and, like, put his hands up like this. Like, he was literally going to get coffin nailed and nothing more has happened there. If you're arguing for that fight to go on, you're just arguing for a defenseless fighter to take another shot. Because him bouncing back with his hands up is not an intelligent defense and is not going to see him defend the shot that's coming. It's just not. Like, and I understand that sort of argument in other places. Like, let's say if someone's in on a takedown and they're taking shots after being knocked down. Then I can see it. Like, this guy's fighting back. He's trying. Randy Brown there coming to and putting up his hands is not him putting in an intelligent defense. It's just a natural reaction. If anyone saw the picture of him as his eyes rolling back in his head and he smacks the canvas, he was done. He was out. And I would nearly always side on let it go a little bit longer for a definitive finish, especially with submissions. But in instances like this too, this was not one of them. Like, again, it's one of those ones where you see it. But you are right. It was a lovely, and what a performance from Gabriel Bonfim altogether. And like those leg kicks early, I watched a lot of tape for the betting show and for the preview coming into it, and like, he wrestles a whole lot. There was no wrestling here. He just beat Randy Brown up on the feet. That jab is very, very good.
It surprised Randy Brown, kind of a game plan. I think Randy Brown might have been coming in here with an opinion that he was going to have to try and defend the takedown, and then when you don't actually experience that in the fight, it can kind of start you a little bit. And I don't think Randy Brown got into the fight because Gabriel Bonfim didn't allow him to, and didn't allow him to with his striking too. So you're dealing with a couple of conundrums there live. And, I thought it was an excellent performance by Bonfim as well. And it was a wonderful knee. I think another, like what I said, the crazy thing is that a bad opinion on the stoppage is kind of trying to outshadow what was a beautiful finish. And, I'm excited to see Bonfim back in there again. If he can produce those level of performances, he's going to be very dangerous as he moves up the rankings.
Yeah, and he can do it in multiple ways as well, because he showed last night he can beat a high-level fighter on the feet, and we've seen him before on the ground. So a smashing display, literally, by Gabriel Bonfim. Just to run through, I suppose, the rest of the card, the next two fights really were as dominant, I suppose. Morales against Matt Schnell. No, you smell that, Schnell. A guillotine from the bottom in MMA in 2025. Absolutely insane, but a lovely guillotine. And then Uras Medic. One of my bets for the week was this to end in the first round knockout, and it sure did. Medic landed one, and that was that. Ismail Bonfim missed weight. And got destroyed by Chris Padilla, who in his last fight against Jai Herbert came out very defensive. And I watched a couple of more of his fights as well. This was very different. He landed some lovely shots and got a lovely finish in this one. I'll jump back to Christian Leroy Duncan and Tulio here in a second, but Jamal Immers, Honey Barcelos, and Jacqueline Cavalcante all got good wins against notable fighters as well. I thought Barcelos looked good in the first and third, and just one of those guys. Josh Hockett is probably the weirdest fighter in the UFC. I hate his stupid shit, to be honest. And then Daniel Marcos won, and Zachary Reese won as well. Good win for Daniel Marcos against Miles John, who's no joke whatsoever. But this Christian Leroy Duncan Marco Tulio fight, Ian, I just want to quickly give you my thoughts on this, because I loved this fight and this performance. Like, coming into this fight, I picked Marco Tulio after years of being a guy who told everyone about Christian Leroy Duncan, who said he was a very, very good fighter and he could be a UFC champion down the line. But like, the accuracy of Marco Tulio and the power at which he lands, I thought might be an issue. But Christian Leroy Duncan, as I alluded to earlier, came out offensive, got on the front foot, landed some beautiful shots, big shots, made himself very elusive. Like that jab and the backhand and the ability to punch around the jab as well of Tulio was completely taken away by Christian Leroy Duncan because of his attacking and because of his movement and his elusiveness. And then he comes out in that second round, goes at it again. Tulio looks like he doesn't really have any answer for it. Lands a beautiful spinning back fist. And I don't know if you saw it out of you, but like Tulio landed a lovely right hand while hurt after it. Christian Leroy Duncan just walked past it and then finished him on the ground. This was a wonderful performance. And he won't get the credit for it because I don't think people realize how good Tulio is, but this was a brilliant win. I think both of these guys in years to come will be ranked. That was a nightmare matchup for Tulio, the way it played out. I think he'll beat a lot of guys in that division, and Christian Leroy Duncan as well. Some matchups are going to be tougher for Christian Leroy Duncan at different parts of this division, but by God, he's an exciting fighter. I think, there's been a few fights where people haven't engaged with him and they've turned into not amazing fights, but when he goes at it, we've seen this in Cage Warriors a load of times. God almighty, he's an amazing fighter. What do you think? I love this fight so much. I know we were talking about it last night and I went back and watched it after I got in from the sister's birthday party, and I watched it twice in a row, to be honest, because I fucking enjoyed it that much. What a fight. What a great win for Christian Duncan.
And I mean, he didn't have it all his own way in the first round either. He had he was put up against the cage. He got taken down as well. And, it was at that stage where I was thinking, oh no, I mean, this might not end too good if he can't get back up here, but he did. And he fought on the attack, and he does what Christian Leroy Duncan does best. That's why we all enjoyed his come up. It's like when he's attacking and he's on the front foot, I mean, he's very, very, very hard to beat. And I think, it's UFC matchmakers' job to ensure that he stays in fights like this too. Tulio, in fairness, he's an attack-minded guy as well, very dangerous on the feet. And I'm just massively impressed. I think, the result and how CLD did it last night with the wonderful finish is that we got to get him to the races here now, Shawnee. Let's start putting some big names and some big tests in front of CLD because, he's, what is he now? He's in his early 30s, Shawnee, is he?
Yeah, he's older than a lot of the up-and-comers, I suppose, in a lot of divisions. So, yeah, it's time, I think.
So that's why I say let's get him in there with some good tests, because he's the type of fighter that the UFC like. He's exciting. Let's see him more often now on main cards, or maybe, on a couple of pay-per-view cards against a couple of big names as well. If you put him in the right fight, he will deliver. And that was a tough fight for him last night, and I think it was a career-defining moment for him too. Because if he had lost that fight, he probably would have been resigned to fighting those kind of fights for the rest of his career in the UFC. But he just said, not today. He got the win against a really tough guy, and he'll be propelled up that division now, and has a good chance to put a good run if he can stay producing those kind of performances in there. He's got wicked power, and he can put anybody's lights out if he connects.
100%. I just wanted to mention as well before we go, another middleweight from the UK, Norbert Navinia Jr. got a win over the weekend as well. He got a triangle off his back over in Hexagon MMA, and I've been a big fan of Norbert for a long time, an old triangle even. I believe that they're doing a big tournament over there, and he was on about fighting over in France, so maybe he'll enter that tournament and fight in that. But if I was the UFC, I'd be trying to sign Norbert Navinia Jr. as soon as I could, like an extremely good striker, and a very, very good wrestler as well. And his father, what was his father, an Olympic gold medalist, wasn't he? So he has he has it in the breeding, and then he's training with MVP and all those lads as well. So he has it in the feeding too. So great performance and a great win for Norbert Navinia over the weekend. All right, have we anything else left to say? Anything else to cover before we go?
Cage Warriors 196 next weekend to get us warmed up. Obviously, Solomon Simon in the main event there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Nick Bagley is not the opponent anymore. That was a kind of a fight that we were all looking forward to. But obviously that fight fell through, and it's one that we'll see again. The Solomon Simon fighting out Team Rhino. He is going in there against what's the guy's name, Shawnee? I'm trying to find it here.
Oh God, I saw it earlier on. This fight's only come together in like the last day or two, hasn't it? Last couple of days,
in the last 2 days. Saik Arujo, Brazilian gentleman, is coming in there to fight for the vacant featherweight title. So look, we had Solomon on the Owl Triangle podcast ahead of the fight. It was a little bit of an awkward interview because things were a little bit up in the air.
Yes.
it's difficult for a fighter when you don't really know what's happening if you're going to be fighting. And he obviously experienced that ahead of his last fight too at the RDS. Didn't end up fighting for that. Subsequently got announced for the Nick Bagley fight. Bagley had to pull out injured, everything up in the air. But I'm glad Cage Warriors and Ian Dean have got him a fight. I'm glad he's getting the chance to fight for the vacant featherweight title. I would expect him to go out there and put on a really, really good performance. He's one of Ireland's best prospects coming through right now. And obviously a win sets up a big fight, I think, against Nick Bagley for that 200 Cage Warriors 200 card that's coming early next year too. So, you know, I think overall, I'm just happy that Solomon Simon is in a position here where he can showcase his abilities, because I know you've been a big fan of Solomon Simon for a long, long time as well, Shawnee.
Yeah, I saw Solomon. I went up to, I think it was myself and Padraig Foran at the time, up in a GA hall in Dublin. Now, I didn't go to many of them, so I can't be one of those people, but I saw him fighting that day. I remember I tweeted out about him. There was a couple of lads on that card, but he really stood out as one of those. And like, he's one of those guys who had the amateur run that you need, maybe. You know, he won some fights, lost some fights, but had a lot of amateur fights. And look at him now. He's only 6 fights into his pro career. And I don't think anyone would argue that he's not on the level of fighting for a Cage Warriors title. I was actually doing something there the last couple of days. And like, I was asked the question, like, who would be like one of the Irish guys? What name would you give us about an Irish guy coming through? And like the first, it was, you know, put all of a shot put to me, and the first name I said was Solomon Simon. The first name that came to my mind was Solomon Simon. Like, I think he's like, if someone was to go to the UFC right now, like, there's a lot of names out there. I suppose yourself and the lads in the Old Triangle are always talking about, but Solomon is a guy who's, I suppose, paid his dues and is at a place now where he is, you know, on the verge of something very, very special. And as you say, it's great that they got him this fight now, so that you could put him on that fight in Dublin at Cage Warriors 200. If it is Nick Bagley, and that was the main event, and Solomon Simon is the champion. Oh my God, that is something. Like, I've said it for,
I think Cage Warriors can put on right now.
I've said it for a long time. I think Nick Bagley is the best fighter in Cage Warriors at the moment. I think he is absolutely fantastic. But imagine Solomon, after winning another fight with the belt around his shoulder, he could go to another level. So that's a special one. But, you know, this card is good overall though as well. The bantamweight title is also on it. Shirzad Kadrian is fighting Elton Armindo. Jordan Vucinic back as well against Topal Merjave, who fought unbelievably in his last fight, if memory serves me correct. Thomas Granval, who we've seen fight an awful lot, he's on this card as well against Ali Sarwa, who's the best nickname in mixed martial arts. Ali Sweet and Sarwa, isn't it? And so, and our guy Joanny Scott as well. Like,
yeah,
he lost the title fight last time out, didn't he? He's fighting Michelangelo Lupoli. So
yeah, real close fight that was as well. And you know, obviously, I think, you know, a guy like Jared Harris is going to be watching the one like this fight very closely as well. If Jared Harris can go out and he's been matched up there now and for an upcoming card too, and if he can get a win there, it might set up a couple of big fights. But yeah, no, really good card, and an excellent card to get us warmed up for the UFC 322 for card in Madison Square Garden. A busy day of mixed martial arts next Saturday.
Kieran Brady from up the north is on this card as well, isn't he?
Yep. That's right.
I watched his fight. He had a very close fight, didn't he? Or what was it? I remember an IWR fighting championships fight. I remember watching it. Someone sent it to me to watch this, and I was very impressed with him. Like, he's a very
well.
Very
yeah, he fought Georgi Grozhev. I think obviously Georgi was coming into that fight from, you know, highly touted as well, and I think that Kieran went in there and surprised a lot of people by going out there and getting the win by submission against a guy who is known for winning by submissions too. And I think also, you know, took the opportunity to sign with Cage Warriors and put on a really, really good performance too against Giovanni Fernandez. And I think, you know, Kieran Brady is a guy that's very, very underrated. You know, spoke with us also on the Old Triangle, very humble guy, very down to earth, you know, let his guard down a lot, talking about a lot of doubts about that he had about himself and everything like that. But we've talked about it with fighters, and I think, you know, a guy like Kieran Brady, if he can stay growing, stay improving, and stay picking up those wins, that belief in his ability that he can get for himself, will turn him into a very dangerous fighter. He's 4-0 right now. He's got a good fight here in front of him against Kadeem Perkins, and I think, I think he has the ability to go out and get another win here and set up a couple of other big fights as well. So really, really nice guy and a really good fighter as well as Kieran Brady. Very well rounded.
Where is he training now? He's not in one of the big gyms, is he? He's kind of in a no. It says in New Era. Is that the gym he's fighting out of, or is he? Well, where is
he also has ties to Team Torres as well.
Oh, yes, he does. So
yeah. So no, he is. He travels down to Team Torres there quite a bit. So.
The jiu-jitsu is probably bad, so if Andrew McGann has anything to do with it, So,
yeah, indeed.
But looking forward to it. As you said, next weekend is going to be amazing, and it's great to have another big weekend of mixed martial arts to look forward to, with a bit of Irish interest as well. And in the week after, obviously we talk about it next week, Ian Gary for obviously we had the big Paul Hughes fights this year, but Ian Gary, can he secure himself the Irish MMA Fighter of the Year next week? Let's see about that. If he loses that fight, I'll tell you what. It could be Solomon Simon. Solomon Simon could win it next week. We'll have to wait and see. So tune in for all of that. All right, we'll leave it there. If you haven't signed up to Patreon, it's a good time to do it. We're at the start of the month. Patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. You heard about the Oil Triangle. Go over and listen to it. Watch it here on YouTube. This is what I should say at the start, but if you're listening to this, we've been on YouTube for the last few weeks. When we've known Graeme, we're on YouTube. So feel free to tune in here and follow Ian at O'Neill MMA. Follow me at
Graeme, very camera shy. Graeme, very camera shy now with the recent run. That
himself and Jamie Carragher, they've both fucking gone missing when Liverpool lose. So it's not unexpected. Although Graeme texted me today, are yourself and Ian doing the podcast today? Knowing well that we'd already fucking organised to do the podcast. So he's like, sure, I would have done it. Sure, go away, you fucking prick. All right, we will leave it there. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you all next time, lads. Good luck.